Audiences at home, if you're just joining us, it's gone just past 14 GMT. That's 5 p.m. here locally in Doha, the capital of the state of Qatar. Let's remind you, of course, of our breaking news that the Israeli military has carried out airstrikes on Hamas leadership here in Qatar. Loud explosions could be heard in the capital and plumes of smoke can be seen rising. Israeli media reports that Khalil al-Hayya and Zahir Jabarin, part of Hamas's negotiation delegation, were among the targets of the strike. Hamas officials say that all members of that leadership delegation have survived that attack.
What you just saw and heard was a broadcast earlier today on Al Jazeera, the Qatari-owned television network. And what it shows is the immediate aftermath of the Israeli Air Force attack on a building in Doha, Qatar, where it is reported that senior leadership of Hamas were gathered to discuss whether or not to accept the latest offer that has been approved by Israel and America that would bring an end to the Israel-Hamas war and a release of all the hostages. Instead, it seems that all senior Hamas leadership has now been eliminated. There remains one person standing still in the Gaza Strip. I'm on the road. I was fortunate to track down State of Tel Aviv friend and regular guest, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Jonathan Conricus, also a senior FDD fellow. And we have audio only today because of the urgent nature of this development, and invite you to listen to this great old-fashioned podcast. As always, Conricus's observations and insights are invaluable. Thanks for being here. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. Okay, Tuesday, September 9th. It's just before 6:30 in the evening in Israel, where you are. Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for making time to speak with State of Tel Aviv. On the road, out there in the field, dramatic moment. What's going on?
Well, thank you for having me on. I think this is a positive development, in my mind, quite long overdue. And I don't think it should be surprising a lot of people because the Israeli chief of staff insinuated to this just about a week ago that the leaders of Hamas outside of Gaza are also in the crosshairs and that Israel intends to bring justice to them for their part in equipping, funding, arming Hamas before October 7, and for what they've been doing since, which is to refuse to end the war and refuse to return the hostages. So I think a major move, definitely. Attacking in the capital of a sovereign country is a statement, and it's a country that definitely is a country that deserves it. So I'm not talking in legal terms. We'll leave that to legal experts. And I'm sure that most will say that they don't, okay, there's no kosher stamp on the Israeli strike here in Doha. But I'm talking common sense. Qatar has long been a state sponsor of terrorism. They have been harboring, aiding, and abetting internationally recognized terror organizations. They have been playing a double game against Israel, with the West, against the West. They are a country that operates perhaps the most potent propagator of terrorism worldwide, and that is Al Jazeera. And I think they are a country that enjoys a lot of clout and a lot of influence thanks to the power that they have bought through their tremendous wealth. So where this puts us is kind of new ground. We still don't know whom of the intended Hamas terrorists were killed. I hope that all of them, Khalil al-Hayya, Khalid Mashal, and less significant terrorists. But I assume that the likelihood of positive results are good. Otherwise, I don't think that the Israeli Prime Minister's office would have issued an official claiming of responsibility. And I think that in the coming hours, we will hear positive confirmation from Qatar. Now, there's a lot of interesting things. I'm sure we will uncover what this means for U.S.-Qatari relations, what this means for our hostages, what it means for the chances of forcing Hamas to surrender and end the war and hand over the hostages, and what it means for Israeli soldiers that are currently poised, ready to assault in Gaza City whether or not that's going to happen. So many moving parts, but definitely big news. In my mind, long overdue. And I think that the message here, the ultimate message that Israel is sending, is one of deterrence, and that even if we do it late, eventually the long arm of Israel, its military capability, will reach those who seek to kill Jews, those who seek to perform genocide against the Jewish state. And that is the basic message that Israel has sent.
And a very strong message indeed. So, a couple of points I want to discuss with you. One is that the United States, I mean, as you know, we've discussed this many times in previous podcasts, that I find that the kind of soft love treatment that Qatar has received from the West and the US, I find it to be very frustrating and I don't understand it. But here we are today. Things have changed dramatically. The United States, shortly after October 7th, renewed its lease in Qatar. The largest US military base in the Middle East is hosted by Qatar. And in return, the United States provides security guarantees to Qatar. So there's pretty much no way that Israeli planes, whether or not they acted on their own, there's no way, unless I'm misunderstanding, that they could enter Qatari airspace without America knowing. That's number one point that I'd like you to address. And the other, because it flows, is Qatar has, in the last moments, announced that it will no longer act as a mediator in hostage ceasefire talks with Hamas, which kind of leaves me, I hate to say it, but sort of smirking like, really? You've been up to this for 2 years and you haven't exactly yielded tremendous results. Some results, but nowhere near what could have been done. So for the US, this is a really big statement because what they're saying to Qatar is, in effect, wink, wink, we will allow this kind of thing to go on if you don't behave. You agree?
I I agree with the assessment that there is no way that Israel would have done this without not only America knowing about it, but President Trump approving it. And there's a big difference. I think there was advance approval, and I think, you only have to listen or read President Trump's tweets or truths social and really read them carefully, because you can find a lot of very useful context and information, and also a good kind of indication of where things are going. I think President Trump changed his tone towards Qatar. I think his team, his people on the ground, eh, albeit they've had very positive, cozy, warm relations with the Qataris, but I think that over the last period that has changed a bit, probably based on the feedback that the president has been getting, that the Qataris are not helping, that they're not applying enough pressure on Hamas, and that Hamas continues to refuse to end the war, hand over the hostages, and surrender. And I think that President Trump is pretty clear. He wants the war to end. He wants the suffering to end, and he wants security to prevail. He wants the hostages home, and the ones that are standing in way are Hamas in their obstinate refusal to do so. And probably President Trump feels that the Qataris aren't pulling their weight and they are not returning favor with the very, very gracious and positive, embracing communications that have been going on between the Trump administration and the Qataris. And maybe President Trump is signaling that, there's everything has a expiration date, and that the Qataris may have reached theirs in this sense. And here's a message. And Israel has, of course, a need to strike these Hamas officials, these Hamas terrorists, and those two interests they align. And I think that's how I would look at it from an American perspective. Strong, strong signal to everybody in the Middle East from the US that, we draw a line. And if you deal with us, and if we, America, give you credit and you get praise from us, we expect action. We expect results. And as you said very correctly, the Qataris have not delivered on anything. They've hardly gotten the release or brokered the release of any hostages. They promised about a year and a half ago to deliver medicine and the life-saving equipment to Israeli hostages and to document it. They failed in doing that. And as far as I know from feedback from Israeli negotiators, the Qatari role has not been one that has been conducive and positive and applied pressure on Hamas. On the contrary, Qatar has been housing, aiding, and abetting the Hamas senior leadership, and they've been providing them with diplomatic cover and regional support. So maybe finally Qatar has run out of runway, and President Trump told them so.
It's quite extraordinary because, as you say, rightly, Qatar is, of course, a sovereign nation. But what that sovereign nation has learned very quickly is that their security is controlled by the United States, because that's what this incident demonstrates. With respect to the Qataris saying, hey, we're no longer going to act as a mediator, I'm not sure, as we said, what they've done to now, but we're not going to continue in that role. So we have a situation which has a lot more questions than answers at the moment. But one of the questions I'd like you to address is this: what is the sort of seniority of Hamas leadership alive on the ground? Is there anyone that we know of with the authority to make any kind of agreement regarding a ceasefire, and who may also have knowledge of and control of where the hostages are held and who is holding them?
Yeah, as far as I know, the answer to all of those questions is one person currently, and that is Izzadin Haddad. He is the terrorist who was nominated leader of Hamas in Gaza. People who like Hamas, they call it leader of the military wing, but it's leader of Hamas in Gaza, commander there, and he calls the shots. And yes, it is. I believe and understand that he is hiding underground in Gaza, and I understand and believe that he is the one who has current authority after Yahya Sinwar was killed, Muhammad Sinwar, and now Izzadin Haddad is the guy who has the ability to do so. And, if Israel, through this action and through the action on the ground with Israeli tanks and APCs, soldiers and airplanes on the outskirts of Gaza City, constantly applying pressure, maybe it could be impressed upon this terrorist that it is time to consolidate Hamas's losses and to get out while the going is good. If that's possible, and if he would make such a decision, hand over the hostages, surrender, and allow the war to end and the suffering to end, that would be a great outcome. I think the chances for that, since he is a Hamas terrorist, senior Hamas terrorist, the chances aren't high, but I'm sure that the few Israeli officials hope that will be the outcome. The cumulative effect of taking out political leadership in Doha and boots on the ground on the gates of Gaza with pressure, with the Air Force dropping high rise or big buildings in Gaza that Hamas was using for military purposes. It's all part of a pressure campaign, and the purpose is to win the war, defeat Hamas, get the hostages back, and return security to Israelis.
Are you aware of, do you know anything about the possible recent intelligence that President Trump may have received that caused him to make comments about some of the hostages possibly or likely having died? He's made the comment a few times that there are likely fewer than 20. And I'm wondering if that knowledge, combined with all of the other things that we've been discussing, might have caused him to just say, all right, enough. You guys are ragging the puck, you're running the clock, you're taking too long, and you're not being truthful. That's it. We're over. Because he really is very emotionally involved, I think, with the hostage issue. Do you know anything more than what we've been reading in the papers that you can share?
Not that I can say here, but I can say that I think your analysis is very correct. Both of President Trump's humane and very noble connection and care for the hostages, for their families. You could see the leader of the free world personally caring about the fate of Israeli hostages. And I think that is a beautiful thing to see, a high level, top level politician showing emotions and guiding policy according to what he believes is right and what I also believe is right, and that is to prioritize, in this sense, to apply pressure in order to get the bad guys, Hamas, to release the hostages. And so that could very much be the case.
That's certainly my assumption based on my obsessive reading and parsing of everything I can get my hands on. And of course, I make this comment with some hesitation, but with the access to intelligence that both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have, taking these actions, which could have been taken long ago, it suggests that they may be assessing that no matter what happens in negotiations, the likelihood of retrieving hostages is not high, period. That includes living and dead. And when you have nothing to lose, you're just going to go for it. To the math, they say.
Yeah, and I would add, I think we should be, truthful about it. There are a lot of positives that may come of this Israeli strike on Hamas leaders abroad. There's also a clear negative, and that could be that Hamas, as a punitive action against Israel, out of despair, out of frustration, will take lethal action against the hostages. They sure have threatened to do it in the past. They haven't followed up, and I'm not aware of any instance that they actually followed through. But sadly, we have to recognize that it is an option here.
It's been quite a week, quite a few days. Of course, for all Israelis, the horrific terror attack in Jerusalem yesterday also looms very large. And, not a day has passed. And then we have this other additional seismic development. Anything else that you think it's important to add at this point, Jonathan?
At this point, I think it's super important that Israel remains clear of its goal, clear-eyed about what it wants to achieve, and focuses on winning the war, defeating Hamas and getting the hostages back, and not getting diverted into distractions and sideshows. I think that what we should be focusing on is how will we defeat Hamas? How will we force them to surrender and stop fighting? That is how you bring an enemy to end a war, and that's what we want to achieve. And to think very hard and act on how do we want the Gaza Strip to look after we win the war, and to start with great haste and great urgency, building that coalition so that we can shape a better future for Israelis, and indirectly also for Palestinians, but first and foremost for Israelis. That has to be the focus. That has to be the aim. That has to be the real priority of the state of Israel, and everything that Israel does has to support that aim.
Well, thank you so much for, again, making yourself available on such short notice, right after the disclosure of such important, dramatic developments. Always appreciate your insights, as do our listeners.
Thank you very much, Vivian, and all the best to you. And let's hope for good news and the return of the hostages and winning the war.
Amen to that.
Thank you.
As always, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And please consider supporting us as we do this work. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to hello@stateoftelaviv.com. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Yon Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team. Thanks to you for being here. We'll be back soon.